The Idris is once again the focus of discussion within the Star Citizen community. In particular, people are talking about the solo Idris and how it's apparently ruining the game. I have my own opinion on this, and I am more interested in looking at the why people are soloing capital ships versus the fact that they simply can do it. Now, in any other game, I am typically a proponent of a multi-crew experience. Things with like tanks in them, for example, I like tanks to be a multi-crew ordeal, right? You have a driver, a gunner, commander, etc. In Star Citizen, I used to be the same way. I have been a huge proponent of making multi-crew vehicles require a crew and have the power of the ship or vehicle scale proportionally to the amount of players inside of the vehicle. That is not how Star Citizen works, though. So over the years, as I have come to face the reality of the game and have come to understand that SIG might not actually understand the concept of 1 + 1 = 3 in terms of a crewed ship being a force multiplier, I have started to now become more in favor of the quote-unquote solo ship experience, the solo capital ship, if you will. But before you get mad at me, just please hear me out. Star Citizen actively encourages you at all times to be in a ship by yourself. It doesn't matter whether it's a smaller ship or a bigger ship. You have ships that technically could offer a multi-crew experience. Like, let's take, for example, the Constellation or the Corsair, for example. Both of these ships are very popular. They have turrets. They have seats for players to sit in. Well, we all know that turrets suck. They don't hit anything. I've done countless videos about this over the years, and we have all now come to the agreement that turrets suck. Now, you might say in the comments that you've figured something out and they work for you and your band of LARPers. Well, you're wrong. Turrets suck. They've always sucked, and they still suck. So, go ahead and say it, but it doesn't change the fact that they suck. But now that we've gotten that out of the way, this game encourages you to rip off those turrets, because when you take the turret guns off, your ship actually gets more capacitor towards the main guns. So if I'm in a Constellation and I have turrets on my ship, those turrets take away shots from my main guns on the Constellation. So what is my incentive to keep those turrets on there? There isn't one. I tear them off. And by tearing them off, my ship has become better. So right here, the game is encouraging me to not multi-crew. It's telling me from the get-go that multi-crew is bad. I'm not talking about whatever planned fever dream that SIG may have for engineering or damage control, whatever it is, because quite frankly, I'm skeptical of them actually being able to get it to work. And, well, work in a reasonable way, not from a technical standpoint, but from a gameplay standpoint. And I'm skeptical of that because the most basic form of multi-crew functionality, the absolute most basic, is the turret, the pilot and the gunner. That interaction is absolutely terrible. So, do you expect me to believe, or anybody reasonable to believe, that SIG is going to be able to make more complex multi-crew systems work and be worth doing over bringing, say, a swarm of single-seat ships? I just don't believe it. And you see that player realization, whether that realization is conscious or subconscious, you see that in the solo Idris. Because before the solo Idris, it was the solo Polaris. Now, the Idris has overshadowed the Polaris because the Idris has pilot-controlled guns, which I think are fine. I would just give the Polaris pilot-controlled torpedoes back, because what fun is it to sit in that awful Polaris seat and aim those torpedoes? You don't even aim anything, you press a button. It's like the Antares backseat gameplay, but on a bigger and much more boring scale. If you gave the Polaris its torpedoes back for the pilot, you would actually now have parity with players fighting the Idris. But because the Polaris cannot, on a 1-to-1 scale, compete with the Idris, all you see are Idrises. The solution is not to take away the Idris pilot guns. It's to give the guns back to the Polaris. But that doesn't address the concern of multi-crew gameplay. Well, what does encourage it? There has not been, in this game's entire lifespan, that it's been a playable product. I'm going to put product in quotations. A playable product. There's not been a single instance of multi-crew being an effective and viable form of play outside of LARPing or killing brainless PvE ships. I'm sorry, but PvP, whether you're a PvP player or not, PvP is the highest form of competition in a game. It's as simple as that. And if a ship is not good against fighting another player, then the ship is simply not good. Because the reality of Star Citizen is that you may have to fight another player. And if you are in a PvE, quote-unquote PvE ship that sucks at PvP but is quote-unquote good for PvE, you are going to be stomped by any ship that is actually good at PvP. Because you don't need a PvE ship to do PvE in Star Citizen. Because if it can do PvP, well then guess what? It can also do PvE. So that whole argument is nonsensical. But it doesn't even stop there with the ship design. There's nothing in Star Citizen that encourages you to play as a group. The game actively punishes you in terms of rewards and even accessibility when you play as a group. It is a solo game from the ground up. It's masquerading as a game that is about group play, but that group play only really comes into reality or fruition when you're fighting other players in PvP. And when it comes to PvP, you're always better off bringing more ships. That's more combined firepower. That's more combined HP and shielding, survivability, maneuverability. It's more targets for the enemy to have to call out. It's always better to bring another ship than it is to put a bunch of players in one ship. So what are they going to do to address this? How much power is an Idris going to scale up, for example, if you have it fully crewed? If you put all the people in there, like you have, what 10, 9, 11, whatever it is, you have them all in there. Is it going to take 12, 13, 14, 15 people to defeat it? What is it going to take to make it worth putting all of those players in that capital ship? For me, the only acceptable answer is for it to be completely immune to anything else that is not a capital ship. So you would have to face off against one Idris that is fully crewed with maybe 2 Polarises that are fully crewed. That's how I would do it. I would have a near separation of the capital ship from the non-capital ship. The capital is essentially being a game in of itself, a whole different entity. So now, instead of individual pilot skill and how good of a dogfighter you are, the skill comes down to the crew and how well the crew works together. But those are my thoughts on this whole Idris thing and multi-crew in general. I've talked about it a lot, but think about this to yourself. Think about the why. Why are people doing it? Well, of course, they're doing it because they own this expensive ship and they want to fly it. That's perfectly understandable. But why, say, when given the option to fully crew an Idris with a bunch of players, players opt to instead bring as many Idrises as possible? And then instead of also crewing those, they would rather bring more individual fighters or smaller ships in addition to the Idris. It's all about volume. There's nothing that is encouraging or forcing these players into a multi-crew role. And that's a game design fault. That's a game design issue. And also, something for you all to think about before I end this video. What are we going to do whenever there's AI crew? Is that going to technically be enough to count as multi-crew for the community in Star Citizen? Or are they going to demand that these ships be crewed by players and players only? Because AI crew is apparently coming. AI blades are apparently coming, allegedly. How much of a difference is there going to be between a fully player-crewed Idris and a fully NPC-crewed Idris? Is that difference going to be enough for me to put real players who also own an Idris in one Idris? Or have them pull their own Idris with an NPC crew? These are the questions that you have to ask because they are real and they are practical questions. I don't think SIG has an answer. And I also don't think that they're going to back down on NPC crew or AI blades because it's something that they have already teased and said was going to happen. Personally, it's not something I would have ever included or promised, but there's a lot of things that SIG has done that I never would have done. So that's a bit of a moot point. Anyway, thank you for watching. Let me know what you guys think in the comments.